Hello, happy Thursday, July 4th. Happy 4th of July for my American viewers. I hope that you have some kind of a holiday today. If you don't, like a day off, if you don't have a day off, I'm so sorry because everybody else is about to come in to your restaurant or your store or whatever that is not closed today. And I'm so sorry about that. But today I thought it would be a good day to share some good news. I have recently become aware because I saw a video on YouTube about Paris Hilton testifying in Congress on behalf of, like, on the topic of the renewal of Title 4B of the Social Security Act here in the United States. Because apparently, since 2021, it has not been renewed, and this is the Child Welfare Act. I think it's, well, there's more parts to it than that, but it greatly impacts child welfare. So I think this is awesome. I think this is how somebody should use their platform. And I watched the whole hearing. I thought it was fascinating. And I'd like to show it to you guys because I think that you'll also find it fascinating. And I think it's a really delightful thing to see a celebrity like Paris Hilton being put center stage to talk about such important topics. I think that a lot of people are already aware of her past unfortunate history with troubled teen camps that she experienced when she was younger. And it's not 100% the same as a lot of what the Title 4B of the Social Security Act covered, because a lot of that has to do with community programs and preventative measures to keep kids out of poverty, out of the foster care system. And she was not in foster care and she was not in poverty. But there is overlap between that and her experience because the types of places that she went, the youth residential behavioral camps, I forget like the proper name for these places because they're not proper places, but we'll talk about that. They are recommended, they are considered nonprofits sometimes, they are recommended by government agencies. They're seen as a totally legitimate way to take care, and reform youth who are just like really bad boys and bad kids, and the only way that they can be made better is by sleeping in a camp, like sleeping in a cabin on the ground for 6 months. That'll teach them how to not be addicted to drugs anymore. I don't know, like, it's weird. Hi, good morning. How you doing? If you're here in the chat, do me a favor, say hello. I'm happy to meet you, happy to greet you here on this Thursday morning. Thank you for those of you who are here live. If you're here on the replay, do me a favor. Oh boy, I messed this up opening up this drink. Do me a favor, like the stream. If you're new to my channel and you like the stream, if you enjoy the stream, then do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. It's free for you. It helps me out. And what else? I'm mostly streaming nowadays instead of doing videos. So set your notifications to all so that you can be aware of when I'm going live. But on that subject, let me tell you about a little something that I have planned. If you're on the replay, if you don't care about the plan, you can skip forward. I will timestamp this. So this topic, as I was diving into this topic of Paris Hilton testifying before Congress, her experience with troubled teen camps, there's a whole world out there to discuss related to this topic. And so what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to do a stream series on this topic starting today. Hi. And when I'm done, I have 3 parts in mind. When I'm done with all 3 parts of live stream, I'm going to edit it down into a video that I will publish as a kind of deep dive video, because I definitely did deep dive on this topic as much as I was able to with my current schedule. You know how it is these days. I just found a lot that I feel like is worth sharing because I feel like you guys would want to know the kind of things that I found out. So, welcome to part 1 of 3, unless I come up with another reason to make a 4th part or something. And I hope that you enjoy being here for the ride, being here for the raw, unedited version of whatever this is. So, welcome. What do I usually say? This video is going to be a little longer. We're going to watch portions of the congressional hearing. I'm not going to play it on 1x speed because that'll be too slow and sad. So it's gonna, oh, don't worry, we'll move it along. And join me on this deep dive. I hope you sit back, relax, grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to dive in to this topic of Paris Hilton testifying in Congress, advocating for youth in unfortunate situations, and hoping to bring about the renewal of Title IV-B on a federal level. Let's get going. No, sorry. Let's dive in. Needed to bring out my old deep dive voice for that. So, for a little bit more specificity about Title IV-B of the Social Security Act, what exactly Paris was talking about, what the whole hearing was about in Congress that Paris Hilton attended, let me show you there's a very handy dandy Google summary of it. So a quick highlighted Google summary from the Child Welfare Capacity Building Collaborative, which is a government website. It says Title IV-B of the Social Security Act is a child welfare funding stream available to federally recognized tribes. This website is focused on tribes, tribal organizations, and tribal consortia. This brief fact sheet, they have a fact sheet. What I've heard so that's part of it. It's a funding stream that is accessible to tribes as well as the rest of the United States of America. Title IV-B, I took notes on the hearing. It was summarized by some of the Congress people as an important child welfare program that provides flexibility funding. That's the big thing. It's provided to the states and tribes, which means they can spend this funding in the ways that are most important and applicable to their particular community. Like a farming community is going to have very different needs than an urban inner city community, right? Title IV-B funding is often focused and channeled into programs that would be preventative and helpful in keeping kids out of foster care and providing more support for kinship care, meaning when a relative cares for a child instead of their parent. So, just to define exactly what we're talking about here. Apparently, this has not been active since 2021, or it has not been funded, or it's been severely underfunded, something like that. So, it seems to me like a very worthwhile cause. I'm kind of surprised that would not still be funded, especially that's a Biden administration thing, that's not a holdover. 2021 was when Biden was in office, so I'm honestly a bit surprised that was the timing on when that was defunded or underfunded or what. So I'm just checking on something really quick in my video because I'm sensing an issue happening. So just give me 1 second, my friends. Thank you for being here. Excuse me. I'm just going to really quick okay. I think we should be all right. Okay. So, that's a quick overview. That's a quick overview of Title IV-B. There is a website that goes into much more detail about it. And I have that linked in my description box of this video. And I think I just accidentally closed it out. What is wrong with me? Hold on. I'm so sorry. So let me share this screen. So basically, this is the boring version of looking at this information. This is, actually, I need to go smaller, don't I? There I go. This is the socialsecurity.act.gov website, which is, you know, a little bit less user-friendly. It's not super fun to read. But you can see Part A, Title 4A, has to do with block grants to states for temporary assistance for needy families. So this is all different. Under here, the second part, Part B, Child and Family Services. And then there's specific subparts related to different things. So this is the section that you would be focusing on if you want to come and do additional research. I have a feeling that the main thing, I think it's 403. See, this is terrible to look at. This is that. I'm relying on what every single person in the hearing was saying as a summary of this, as flexible funding that can be spent on whatever that state or that community who receives the funding deems to be most appropriate and useful for their community to prevent children falling into poverty and needing to go into the foster care system, child welfare. But if you want to do more research, again, this page is linked in my description box of this stream. So when Paris Hilton went to Congress, Paris's big day in Washington, D.C. Paris has been part of advocating for a long time for with a group called Breaking Code Silence, to prevent places like, basically like troubled teen camps, either from existing or from being as terrible as they are, especially without any government oversight. She has worked for a while with an organization called Breaking Code Silence, and I want to share their page super quick. I was trying to make this a nonprofit like fundraiser, this stream for Breaking Code Silence, and they're not registered on YouTube yet as a nonprofit. So I submitted a request for them to be reviewed and added. But if anybody, you know, I have their website linked in my description as well. I think that they're a worthy cause to donate to. Oh God. Sorry. But Breaking Code Silence is an organization that's all about a couple of things. One, the idea of breaking code silence, and that's their hashtag, is having survivors telling their stories and not feeling they need to be subdued into silence. Their motto here, preventing institutional child abuse and empowering survivors through research. Advocacy, awareness, legislation. That's where Paris comes in here today. And I think that's Paris Hilton there. They have partnership. They have a big partnership with Paris Hilton. They've also been, I think they did a video with Bad Baby, who, spoiler alert, later in this series, we're going to talk about Bad Baby. There's a lot to talk about there. But for the moment, we're going to focus on Paris's big day in Congress. And I just wanted to show you this website. It's breakingcodesilence.org, nice and easy. If you want to learn more about this organization, I think it is through this organization or in partnership with them that Paris has already helped write laws for oversight and restrictions on these troubled teen camps. And those are individual state laws in 9 different states across the US. So it's a sign of progress that she was able to do that in individual states and now is speaking at a federal level, raising awareness about this to the United States Congress, and hopefully getting some wheels turning at a national level instead of individual states. Because there's a lot of things that the US likes to break down state by state that don't have to be, like making sure your kids are fed. That's probably something that all the states can agree on. That's something that I would call even a bipartisan support kind of issue. And I'll also say that this hearing was notably and delightfully a bipartisan support type of situation. So that was really, really nice to see. Yeah, hold on. All right. Okay, cool. So that's their website. Go check them out. I think there's not much other like precursor information that I need to share. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the hearing. It is 4 hours long. We are not watching all 4 hours. I'll just go ahead and tell you we're not doing that. I won't do that to you. But we will watch certain parts of it. So let me pull that up. So this video is coming to us from KUTV2 News, Salt Lake City. Is my face on top of it? No, it's not. Which is interesting because Salt Lake City, Utah, right? Utah is the home of a lot of these troubled teen camps. I was listening to a lot of different resources about troubled teen camps, and pretty much every camp that they mentioned was based in Utah. I have some thoughts about why that is. I'm going to express those thoughts in later parts of this series, but put a pin in that because that's gonna come back up. Just saying. In other parts of this series, though, not too much today. So, I'm gonna start watching. Again, we're not gonna watch all 4 hours. I'm gonna start this. Let me know if the sound is okay.
I'm here to be the voice for the children whose voices can't be heard. While this committee has the responsibility to move bipartisan solutions forward to protect them, I strongly advocate for the reauthorization of Title IV-B. Families need resources and support so they don't need to come into the child welfare system in the first place.
The committee will come to...
And now the hearing begins. So those are her main goals in talking. Let me give you just a quick kind of outline of what happens in this hearing. At least I might not talk to everything. The first 10 and a half minutes of this video hearing from KUTV, they have that little intro with Paris Hilton, with a highlight of Paris Hilton. And then it just goes into the hearing itself. So the opening is Congress people who are like the chair of this. This is the Ways and Means Committee, by the way. So it's about so we have all this federal funding. How do we divide it up, essentially, to all these different needs across the country? Ways and Means. So first, the chairs of the committee in Congress spend some time summarizing the state of things and their recent efforts to work on things. And then they introduce the witnesses that are there today. I have to say, I hope that you watch this hearing. If you have some time on your hands, I think it's fascinating. I also think that Paris Hilton is absolutely not the only noteworthy, like interesting person that was at this hearing. I think that Mr. Geen was delightful to listen to. As well as the other lived experience advocate who was there, named Mrs. Peterson. So, and Ms. Manfield, but she just didn't talk as much. But all four of the like civilian witnesses, essentially, who came and spoke at this hearing, were fascinating and delightful. So I'm going to start with opening remarks from the witnesses. Basically, up until then, it's just the Congress people being like, we're here to be Congress and do things and solve problems. So here these are the problems and we are going to solve them. And I'm like, okay, that's, yes, welcome to you doing your job. And I'm going to skip up to where the witnesses actually start talking because that's the more exciting part. So first, the first opening statement that we get is from Paris Hilton.
Thank you all for joining us today. Your written statements will be made part of the hearing record, and you each have 5 minutes to deliver remarks. We'll start with you, Ms. Hilton.
I'm going to put it on 125 speed. Sorry, I just for the sake of DMCA protection, but
Thank you.
if you need to slow it down, feel free.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Neal, and members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to discuss how to improve care for the nearly 400,000 children that are living in the foster care system as we speak. While my experience was not through the foster care system, I know from personal experience the harm that is caused by being placed in youth residential treatment facilities. When I was 16 years old, I was ripped from my bed in the middle of the night and transported across state lines to the first of 4 youth residential treatment facilities. These programs promised healing, growth, and support, but instead did not allow me to speak, move freely, or even look out a window for 2 years. I was force-fed medications and sexually abused by the staff. I was violently restrained and dragged down hallways, stripped naked, and thrown into solitary confinement. My parents were completely deceived, lied to, and manipulated by this for-profit industry about the inhumane treatment I was experiencing. So can you only imagine the experience for youth who are placed by the state and don't have people regularly checking in on them?
And that's the big point here. It's not just, here's my story, I had a bad time in these facilities. It's that she understands and is here to advocate for children who are placed in those facilities by the state. And there are people who have described, like, when there are juveniles who are arrested for crimes and, they go through the court process, one of the options sometimes for their sentencing is to go to places like this. But there's also, and we'll talk about this more in future episodes of this series, there's also kids who go in there because they were SA'd or because they were emotionally aid, or I think I'm late enough in that I can say abused. They were emotionally abused. They experienced something that they were a victim of and that they're a survivor of, but because of the trauma, it's making them act out, and they were sent to these camps for that reason. So it's a strange bag. It's a strange, like, mixed bag of who goes to these camps. She's there to say the state should not send people to these camps. The government should not be funding the camps in that way. And the way that they would be doing that is, well, here. So I'll let her. Miss Paris. Sorry. That's not how her name is. Hi, I said play.
I attended facilities with foster and adopted youth, and I heard their testimony that they feel like they were forgotten, being shipped from facility to facility their whole childhoods. Today, residential facilities are continuing to warehouse over 50,000 foster youth and unknown number of adopted youth in lockdown facilities. Innocent kids who have not committed crimes, kids whose parents didn't have resources to support them, kids whose parents passed away, kids who have already experienced trauma. This $23 billion a year industry sees this population as dollar signs and operates without meaningful oversight. It costs approximately $800 to $1,000 per day to place a foster youth in a facility, significantly more expensive than serving them in their own communities. What is more important, protecting business profits or protecting foster youth lives?
And that's a particularly important point because this is the Ways and Means Committee. They're talking about finances and where to send funding. And you can always win over both sides of the aisle in the USA and in Congress when you say this is a waste of money. Here's a better way to use money.
16-year-old Cornelius Fredericks was placed in a facility because his mom tragically died and his dad was in prison. His life ended after being tackled and violently restrained by 8 staff members for nearly 10 minutes after innocently throwing a sandwich in the cafeteria. They killed him on the floor of the lunchroom in front of dozens of other children. Emergency services had been called 300 times in the year leading up to his death, with 56 violations substantiated by the state. The state could have prevented this. Jesse Terry's life ended at just 7 years old. In his final hours, he was publicly shamed.
So I'm sorry. I completely forgot to give like a content warning. This is, I think, going to be the only part where she's really... It was a 4-hour hearing, so I don't remember exactly, but there's not a ton of discussion of the bad things that happen to people at these camps. But Paris's story, because that's her story, when she's giving this initial speech, she does talk about some really terrible things. So if this is triggering for you, I'm so sorry. And I should have said something earlier. Come back in like 3 minutes. If not, you can bear through it. Also, a few more people have showed up. Do me a favor, please like the stream. We've got a light stream this morning, and I'd like to see if giving the stream more likes will let people know that we're here. All right, I'm gonna get back into it. My bad.
Verbally abused, left in his room alone for nearly 6 hours, and physically restrained by staff members until he lost consciousness. When first responders arrived, there was vomit in his mouth and throat, running down his cheeks and onto the floor. Why can't we as a society see that these kids are hurting? They need love and kindness, not beatings and restraints. As a mom, these stories break my heart. When your child is born, your heart is full of love, of all hopes and dreams you have for them. I assure you that these were not the dreams that were envisioned for Cornelius, Jasion, and thousands more who have suffered immensely. I'm here to be the voice for the children whose voices can't be heard. While this committee has a responsibility to move bipartisan solutions forward to protect them, I strongly advocate for the reauthorization of Title IV-B. Families need resources and support so they don't need to come into the child welfare system in the first place. For children who do end up in foster care, we cannot allow them to grow up in facilities. The treatment these kids have had to endure is criminal. These kids deserve to grow up in safe, family-centered environments. I will not stop until America's youth is safe. I've helped pass 9 state laws on this issue. I am strongly advocating for the federal bipartisan Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act. I supported the Senate Finance Committee report, Warehouses of Neglect, that validates everything those with lived experience have been saying. And I recently went to Jamaica to support and find appropriate placements for American adopted youth who had been raped, waterboarded with a hose, and held in solitary confinement in a facility internationally. Their parents had adopted them when they were young, promised them a better life, and then shipped them off to an international facility to be warehoused there until they turned 18. How could we let this happen to them? Progress isn't an option anymore. It's a life or death responsibility. If you are a child in the system, hear my words. I see you, I believe you, I know what you're going through, and I won't give up on you. You are important, your future is important, and you deserve every opportunity to be safe and supported. Congress, please join me in creating a world where all children have a right to family, love, education, and the support they need. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you.
So that was Paris Hilton's written statement, which she read out, but then later on in the hearing, she's going to testify more spontaneously, essentially, answering questions. Some of what she says does seem scripted later on, but I think she just has like talking points that she's used to giving at this point because she's been part of passing 9 state laws. So she's got some experience with talking to Congress people and what her main points are. So those stories certainly are heartbreaking to hear. And what's even more heartbreaking to me is the fact that these facilities are like foster kids are just sent there because they don't have anywhere else to put them is the picture that she's painting. That's what she's describing. But they're supposed to be like these rehabilitational behavior help kind of places. Just because you're in foster care doesn't mean you're like a bad kid who needs rehabbing. So I don't know why these places are like, they're not solutions to a problem that exists. The problem that exists is a kid is in foster care because the parents are dealing with something that puts the kid in an unsafe place. Typically that's what it is. It could be poverty, it could be addiction, it could be all sorts of this and that. So I that's something I did not know about before coming into this hearing, that was an option for foster kids to get sent to just these troubled teen camps instead of like a foster family. So, and then some of the reasoning for why that might be and why there's a lack of parents and families available to foster is coming up next. So let's go through the next section, the next witness's introduction statement.
Thank you, Ms. Hilton. Mr. Green, Mr. Geen, you are now recognized.
Thank you. Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Neal, and distinguished members of the committee. As has been mentioned, I am currently a fellow at the Bipartisan Policy Center and chair of the Board of Trustees at the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. Over the past 35 years, I have worked in research, philanthropy, and advocacy to advance data-driven reforms to improve our nation's child welfare system. During this entire period, bipartisanship has been a defining feature of federal child welfare legislation. In 1993, Congress created Title IV-B Subpart 2, now known as the Mary Lee Allen Promoting Safe and Stable Families programs. While it is a relatively small program compared to the Title IV-E entitlement that supports foster care and adoption, 4B has been a critical source of flexible funding available to states and tribes, enabling them to craft innovations that address the specific circumstances in their own communities. Compared to Title IV-E, states and tribes can use 4B funds to serve a broader range of children, youth, and families with a wider variety of services. In this way, 4B serves as a critical complement to Title IV-E funding. Title IV-B also includes dedicated funding for key functions of the child welfare system, including the court improvement program. However, 2 decades of steady erosion to the program's funding has limited the impact that Title IV-B can now have. With my time, I'd like to share several findings from an intensive 50-state landscape analysis conducted by the Bipartisan Policy Center's Child Welfare Initiative.
Are we on board so far? Do we get what he's saying? He's the money guy. He's the guy that's really kind of summarizing and clarifying the financial impact of Title IV-B, how it's laid out, how it's spread out, how it's used, and how it could be used more effectively, and why it needs to be funded, if not funded more than it has been in the past, adjusting for inflation at least, just saying. Okay, please, if you have any questions, I watched this whole hearing, so go ahead and put them in the comments. Also, hey, like the stream if you want. Okay.
An overarching finding from our research is that while polarizing rhetoric often overshadows discussions of common ground, there are, in fact, many areas of agreement. For example, there is overwhelming support for the vision of the Family First Prevention Services Act. There is recognition that high-quality, short-term therapeutic residential interventions are needed for a small number of children. There is also strong support for redoubling efforts to prevent child abuse and neglect and invest in family preservation services. At the same time, there are frustrations in the field over the implementation of Family First.
So, really quick, do you hear what he said? A small number of kids benefit from residential services and residential programs. But it sounds like, he's making that clarification because, he's sitting right next to Paris Hilton, because of what I was saying before of like, if you're just warehousing foster kids at any old place, like if it's supposed to be some kind of a behavioral rehab camp, and they're not bad kids, they're just in bad circumstances, then it doesn't make sense. So he's saying only a small number of kids do benefit from that, and we really need to look at these other things.
Many states are struggling to increase capacity of alternatives to residential settings as they seek to eliminate the use of non-therapeutic group homes. There is insufficient community
Non-therapeutic group homes. They're just putting kids in big old houses and said, this is your home now.
based service capacity to meet the high needs of youth in the system, especially effective mental health services. States and tribes are running into barriers in taking full advantage of the prevention funding available as a result of Family First. This includes concerns about the Prevention Services Clearinghouse and how funding can be used to meet the concrete needs of families. There is widespread concern that child welfare is becoming a catch-all system, being asked to make up for the failures of other systems, resulting in children and families being inappropriately involved with child welfare authorities. States are starting to address this by clarifying their definitions of neglect, making improvements in mandatory reporting and investigations, and enhancing legal representation for both children and parents. There is widespread recognition of the challenges states and tribes face in maintaining a qualified workforce. There is considerable appreciation for the positive progress achieved in supporting kinship families, and yet recognition that there is far more work we need to do to make sure that all kin can adequately care for children.
Kinship families, so that means when a child needs to be placed with a different relative besides their parents, while, like, as a foster care option, while their parents are dealing with whatever needs to be dealt with, before the child goes back. So if they live with grandma, they live with an aunt or uncle, they live with, somebody else.
There is a strong desire to improve the outcomes for older youth involved in the system, and frustration with the persistent challenges we face in meeting the basic needs of youth aging out of foster care at age 18. Other topics that garnered significant interest and widespread support include strengthening the Indian Child Welfare Act, reducing the administrative burden that accompanies federal funding, especially for tribes, while also improving system oversight and accountability, creating more flexible funding options that allow states and tribes to meet unique community needs, and finally, continuing to expand the evidence base for child welfare interventions. I'll end by recognizing the numerous bills introduced by members of this committee seek to address many of the challenges I've just listed. I want to thank you for your continued commitment to keeping children safe and supporting families, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Peterson, you are now recognized.
Good morning. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm thankful to Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Neal, and the members of the committee for convening this hearing on reauthorizing Title IV-B.
So, oh no, bad pause. Slightly better. So that was Mr. Geen. Like I said, he's the money guy. He also is the research guy, the data guy. The second half, basically, of that opening statement that he just made was all about the findings of this report and this research, what people are supportive of and what they're less supportive of, and the themes of problems that are rising to the surface based on their data and research. Now, Mrs. Peterson is here as a lived experience advocate, sharing her story in the foster care system. Paris Hilton is also a lived experience advocate, sharing her story at these troubled teen camps, which she went to 4 of during her days as a rich celebrity girl. She still was sent. I think the story with Paris Hilton, I'm going to dive more into it in future episodes, but I think the consensus is, or the opinion is, that Paris Hilton's parents didn't want to, or felt they couldn't, or didn't want to, parent her when she was in her era of, going out and partying when they moved to New York City. So they were like, we're just going to send you away to a camp, and they'll fix you, and then you can come back and you'll be fixed. I think that's ultimately what a lot of parents kind of look to these camps for, and what those camps are kind of marketing themselves as, being able to fix your kid. I think that it's important for Paris to speak about how that's not what it's about. It's about beating kids into submission is essentially the what it comes down to. So now we're going to hear from Mrs. Peterson, who didn't go to one of those camps, but who did experience the foster care system from a different angle. I like having these two different angles present at this hearing.
I went into the foster care system twice in my life due to the physical and emotional abuse I endured. I hoped that going into the foster care system would allow me to escape the chaos of my first family, but instead I entered into a different form of chaos when I entered the system, and I moved through 12 different homes during my time in care. Eventually, I moved in with a foster mom who took me to church regularly, and I was reunited with a woman named Tanya, who, when I lived with my mom, would come and pick me up when situations would become volatile. Tanya worked for a nonprofit that mentored kids coming from hard places, and she became a mentor to me. The leadership of my church allowed me opportunities and encouraged me to share my story. By witnessing their love for me and other kids in the foster care system, I began to believe that Jesus might love me too, and I gained a confidence that I didn't have before. At the same time, I was running track in high school, and my track coach became my father figure. After I aged out of the foster care system, he invited me into his home, and under his training, I became a 5-time state champion in track, which allowed me to go to college on a full scholarship and become a part of the 3% of former foster youth to obtain a bachelor's degree when I graduated from Hillsdale College in 2018. Now I'm an author and public speaker. I share my story to help organizations raise funds to serve vulnerable children. I help communities and churches become equipped to fulfill the call of James 1:27, which is to care for the orphan and the widow. And my greatest honor is that I'm a wife and a mom. I have 2 biological children, an adopted adult son. My husband and I are kinship providers for my biological sibling, and we're also foster parents. As I look back on my
She's going to look back on her experience quickly, but before I say that, her testimony talks a lot about her faith journey and how it impacted and helped her life. My nose is so red. And what I'll say as a person who has my own checkered past with Christians, she sounds like she went to the unicorn of, evangelical Protestant churches that actually practices what they preach in terms of community outreach and, James 1:27, caring for the poor, the sick, the widow, the child, whatever. I missed the quote that she said. So I just give that preface to say, content warning if you're someone like me who might be a little bit like hearing a lot of church talk, but she's very genuine and she's genuine in her beliefs. I think she's also, and she points out at some point during this hearing, she knows that she goes to a church that actually practices what they preach while other churches do not. And that's why she is talking about like, hey, other churches, do it. Less talk, more action. And I appreciate that type of inter-community critique is what Christendom needs a lot of right now. So we're going to keep listening to Mrs. Peterson's opening statement.
In my experience, I see the crucial role my community, nonprofits, and church played to bring me to where I am today. And I believe that I wouldn't
We face
Whoa, too
in
far
meeting
back.
the
I'm sorry.
believing in me enough to empower me, give me purpose, made me stamps for about 6 months. I received no financial support
I'm
or
so
government
sorry.
assistance. I have 2 biological children, an adopted adult son. My husband and I are kinship providers for my biological sibling, and we're also foster parents. As I look back on my experience, I see the crucial role my community, nonprofits, and church played to bring me to where I am today. And I believe that I wouldn't be where I am without them. It has been over 10 years since I aged out of the foster care system, and there was not as much government assistance as there is today for youth coming out of care. Outside of being on food stamps for about 6 months, I received no financial support or government assistance after I aged out. This experience taught me the value of hard work. I earned and saved money by working in a factory, in a diner as a waitress, and through various internships from organizations and my church. Handouts in the form of checks made me feel more like a charity case, but having a community of people believing in me enough to empower me, give me purposeful jobs, and mentor me to gain the skills needed to live a prosperous life is what has helped me break generational cycles of poverty, abuse, neglect, homelessness, and so on. Over the past couple of years, my husband and I have mentored a handful of former foster youth by volunteering for a local nonprofit. We witness them live off of free housing and stipends given to them while not maintaining work. We see these young adults continually fall out of these programs and into homelessness because these resources are not long-term solutions to the problems these youth face. Real relationships, connectedness, and love are. As the famous quote states, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. More plainly, we could offer youth housing, or we could invest in them being taught the skills to acquire housing themselves, which could result in them having an investment to offer future generations, in turn, breaking generational cycles of poverty. When I was in foster care, I remember receiving a duffel bag of hair products I couldn't use, a teddy bear I was too old for, and many other products that went untouched. Now, when a foster child moves into our home, we receive 2 duffel bags full of useless products. While the emphasis of this movement started with the pure intention of not letting any foster child carry their belongings around in a garbage bag, I feel it is now an oversaturated movement to make the giver feel like they've done their part. We are here because our part is not done.
So I'm just going to jump in to say because of the nature of the United States today, she makes a lot of statements that like are social and at the same time political. She kind of lets on what her perspective is, and a couple of things that she says can rub people the wrong way. I'm not gonna lie, but I think that the points that she makes here especially are good, where there are a lot of times that people wanting to contribute end up, with the best of intentions, not doing things that are actually helpful. And I love this example that she showed of like the duffel bag of hair products she can't use. Oh, hi, Kate, welcome back. It's a congressional hearing. Paris Hilton already gave her opening statement. And I'm gonna pull out some other highlights from the hearing after we go through all of the 4 witnesses' opening statements. Thanks for being back here. I love this example that she gives of, I got a duffel bag full of hair products I couldn't use and a bunch of other stuff I didn't really need. And now my foster kids get 2 duffel bags full of shit they don't need, instead of, it's that desire to give, but not giving what's actually helpful to the kids. And I think that that's a lot of the theme of this conversation in general, of like, Congress has money, they need advice on where to spend it in a way that's actually helpful to the community that they're trying to serve. Part of that has to do with, like, that's why funding this particular Title 4B, giving the money to those communities so that they amongst themselves can divvy out the money in ways that benefit their community the most. But also, I don't know if it's her, if it's somebody else, maybe Mr. Geen, they're going to make a point about the cost of preventative care for kids, keeping them out of foster care and like institutional, the residential homes for troubled teens or whatever, as opposed to the cost of, after the fact, putting them into those places, and the cost of kind of cleaning up after something has happened is always like 3 or more times the cost of if they had just put some things in place to prevent bad things from happening. So, it's this kind of, how are we going to allocate this money? It's kind of the theme of this hearing. Everybody agrees we want to take care of kids. We don't want them to be in poverty. We don't want them to be hungry. We don't want them to end up being ABUSED. But how do we divvy up this funding so that we're putting it in the right places and actually doing something helpful?
I point to make the giver feel like they've done their part. We are here because our part is not done. I point to this illustration because it's an imperfect example of how society treats foster youth as a whole. Throw money at kids rather than invest time to nurture relationships with them. Isolate young adults in free housing rather than welcoming them in, or at least showing them how to obtain housing with a roommate like most young adults do, so they're not so alone. These kids are all of our kids, and we justify treating them like they're not by handing them bags, clothes, products, and not our presence. While it is Title 4E that offers youth in foster care these tangible resources and addresses these issues, it is crucial that we address Title 4E alongside Title 4B, because right now it seems that the system is giving young adults basic necessities that they need to survive. But when we invest in them to have strong and authentic relationships in their communities, we give them what they need to thrive. I was fortunate enough to form relationships with community members like my track coach, Tanya, and others from my church. And over time, they became the people who filled the role in my family. What they've given me, taught me, and how they have guided me has been invaluable. If we want young adults to learn self-governance, they need to be taught skills for their adulthood, and they also need caring adults to continue to guide them into adulthood. It's important that federal funding streams like Title 4B are updated to meet the current challenges in the child welfare system. A special emphasis should be placed on community relationships and the role they play in helping youth gain the valuable skills they need for adulthood. If you're a child or youth coming from a hard place, I hope you hear that you are deserving of love, and there is a beautiful purpose and plan for your life. I want to especially express gratitude to Chairman Smith for offering me the opportunity to advocate for youth in this way and finding value in my lived experience as a former foster youth, but more importantly, as a child of God. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Mansfield, you are now recognized.
Thank you. My name is Alexis Mansfield, and I'm the Senior Advisor at the Women's Justice Institute on issues related to children and families. I'd like to thank Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Neal, and the members of the committee for the opportunity to testify about how to strengthen the child welfare system and protect America's children. I would also like to thank Representatives Davis and LaHood for introducing H.R. 8799, the Parent Act. The Women's Justice Institute, or WJI, is a national think and do tank based in Chicago that works to address women's mass incarceration. In addition, I'm the director of the Incarcerated Survivors Program at Ascend Justice, a civil legal aid organization focused on survivors of domestic violence and parents impacted by the child welfare system. I also sit on the Commission on Children of Incarcerated Parents and the Illinois Department of Corrections Adult Advisory Board. Before I was a lawyer, I was a teacher in the Chicago public school system for 8 years.
She's like the most professional of all the professionals. Like all of the stuff that she does. But it also, she has such valuable experience with all of these different accolades. And I wish that they had talked to her more during this hearing, to be honest with you. But, hi Disney. But, you know, they focused on the others, and that's fair. But I just think that she's fantastic, and I'd love to hear more from Ms. Manfield.
One time, about halfway through the school year, the principal came into my classroom with a little 6-year-old boy and told me that he was my student now because he'd been kicked out of the other 2 classrooms. That first day, I met with him privately, and I asked, "What do you need?" He replied, "I want to write my mom." He explained that his mom was in prison and that his last teacher had told him that he couldn't send letters to her because she was a bad person. I told him he could write, he could draw, whatever he wanted to send to her. From that moment on, he changed completely. Knowing what I know now, I would not have just let him write her. I would have found a way to engage her in his education. But the fact remains, what he truly needed was his mom. And this is a pattern I see again and again with children. In 2016, I co-founded the Reunification Ride with several other organizations. This monthly program, which is now housed at the WJI, brings children of incarcerated mothers to visit them in child-friendly settings, to bond as families and to be together with other children sharing the same experiences. We sometimes have to skip a month as we rely on private funding and crowdsourcing, and we don't always have enough money to go.
I don't know why there's like a million children walking around behind these witnesses. There's this kid, and then behind Mrs. Peterson was like this little girl who kept popping up. I guess they're making the point of like, kids are important, so important that we're going to have them sit like underneath our desk and just like, I don't understand. But anyway, they're very, very nicely dressed, very professional youngster joining us today. Anyway, you are seeing a child, yes.
We sometimes have to skip a month as we rely on private funding and crowdsourcing, and we don't always have enough money to go. But usually once a month, approximately 40 children and caregivers make the journey 3 hours each way from Chicago, and sometimes even Indiana or Michigan. Hundreds of families have participated. We work with the Department of Corrections to create child-friendly processes and environments. This year, we also assisted in creating a Father's Day program at the neighboring men's prison for over 60 children. When we arrive and walk from the prison gatehouse to the gym, the kids start to walk a little bit faster and faster. And by the time we get to the gym, several of the children are in all-out runs. They jump and leap onto their mothers, holding them tight in their arms. I remember the time that one 10-year-old girl who had not seen her mother in person in several years came with us. Within 5 minutes of seeing each other, she had whispered to her mom that she was being abused. We were able to get her moved to a safe home within days. In Illinois, we have several model programs that promote critical bonds between children and their incarcerated parents. Unfortunately, children in foster care are excluded from almost all programs. For example, with the Reunification Ride, caseworkers from the Department of Children and Family Services will contact us, explaining they have no way of transporting children or staff to bring them, and will ask us if we will instead. We have to say no, because we have been unable to find a single private insurance company that will allow us to have foster youth participate. We also have 2 rare important programs of decay.
And I'll get back, but and that's the problem. It does seem that foster kids get this targeting that doesn't make sense. Like I said, like sending them to behavioral camps when they're not behaving badly, they're just in bad circumstances. Like they're not the cause of them being in foster care. That's usually their parents, something happening with their parents that needs to be addressed. So why do they need to be sent to like troubled teen camps? Similarly, why are insurance companies so afraid of having foster kids on, a bus trip to go see their parents? Like, why is there this targeting of foster kids, first of all? And then what can we do to remedy it? Having programs, having availability, like having that funding. Like I said, she's fascinating to listen to. but that's kind of a theme that I see across this hearing is like foster kids get treated like just it feels like targeting. It feels like bullying in a way. There's like this assumption that they're bad or that they're a liability when they're just kids in bad circumstances. It's really frustrating to see it throughout this hearing.
Decatur Correctional Center. One is called the Moms and Babies Program, where newer pregnant mothers can live with their babies, and the other is a housing unit called the Reunification Wing, where children are able to spend full days with their mothers. Children in the foster care system are not allowed to participate in either program, despite the fact that foster youth are more likely to not live with relatives and to not be able to visit without support. Ensuring visits between foster youth and their incarcerated parents supports individual court decisions that in-person visitation for the child and their parent is appropriate and beneficial for the child. The majority of parents are in jail or prison because of charges completely unrelated to their children, and their children need and deserve a chance for healthy bonding. Certainly, we do not want foster youth to feel punished by being denied these opportunities. There are many ways for systems to collaborate, including improved supplemental visitation options, ensuring incarcerated parents can access abuse hotlines, aligning service plans with available programming, and increasing access to legal services. Funding and incentives for collaboration between correction systems, child welfare systems, and private organizations is vital for children to bond, for family reunification, and to ensure that children are protected from harm. Studies have shown that nurturing these bonds also reduces recidivism and represents a critical opportunity to prevent intergenerational incarceration.
Everything that she just mentioned is preventative measures, preventative care. And a lot of what you're going to see throughout this hearing, if you watch the whole thing, are suggestions on here's what we can do to prevent kids from even needing to go into the foster care system, and let's invest in those programs. Which is, it's interesting because a lot of American law is reactive. We have to wait until something bad happens before we step in to try to address it and fix it, rather than we can see an obvious place where something could go wrong. Let's try to curb that, because America is so, freedom first, don't tell me what to do, etc. But then it's like, so I have to wait until you abuse your kid before I tell you you shouldn't have done that, rather than saying, hey, don't do that. That's the annoying part about America. But I'm glad that there's so much talk in this hearing, the Ways and Means Committee, the people with the money, about specifically we need to emphasize prevention. And hopefully it makes a difference for once. I don't know.
This bill is an excellent way to demonstrate how we can give foster youth and their incarcerated parents meaningful opportunities to bond and promote healthy relationships. Thank you all for supporting families.
Thank each of you for your testimony. We'll start with the question and answer session. Ms. Hilton, you have...
So hold on a second. So next they do a bit of a Q&A. And so I'm going to go back to my outline here. There's a Q&A session from basically the rest of the hearing. Here's what happens. Those opening statements were a good summary of each of those people's perspective and what they have to offer to the hearing. They start a Q&A session with the chair, and certain questions and answers seem like pre-written, but a lot of them don't. At not too much longer in, about 10 further minutes into this hearing, the Congress goes to vote on something. I don't know if it's this, though, because they're still having you don't stop in the middle of the hearing to go vote on the thing you're hearing about and then continue hearing about it. So I was not positive about exactly what the vote was for. But yeah, so there was something that I wanted to, so they go and vote, and then they come back, and then they continue talking about this subject. So I wanted to highlight a couple of moments of conversation throughout this 4-hour hearing. Again, it's a great hearing, very educational. I recommend that you go watch it. Since we kind of started watching this first Q&A with Paris, he started introducing his question. I think let's do this one, and then there's another one later on.
for your testimony. We'll start with the question and answer session. Ms. Hilton, you have personal experience with congregate care facilities, and you've been a champion for individuals impacted by their experiences in those care environments, especially teenagers. As you know, this committee is currently working on reauthorizing the child welfare programs and looking at how we can ensure additional resources are available to foster youth and children in need, with a focus on keeping them in their homes and united with their families. Based on your experiences, is that a priority you believe we should be focused on, and what reforms do you think we should be considering to achieve these goals?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Smith, and thank you so much for visiting the facilities. I want to applaud the committee for taking the time to consider how to improve the foster care system. These youth don't have a voice, and anyone checking in on them on their well-being. Locking kids in facilities is harmful, and from my own experience, has caused me severe post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma that I'll have for the rest of my life. We need to reauthorize Title 4B and invest in kinship care, placement with a relative, as youth should be with family or adults who know and love them. I would also like to see the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act passed, as we need more transparency of what is happening in treatment facilities serving foster youth. The cost of treatment is 5 times more in a facility than community-based services. It is a completely ineffective use of funds, and it hurts the kids and costs the taxpayers more.
Thank you. Mr. Geen, I think we can all agree that no child should be left in a home where they are suffering true neglect or abuse. At the same time, I hope that we all can agree that keeping children in their homes with their parents is the best course of action, so long as the child's well-being is not threatened. Unfortunately, in Missouri and other states, a large percentage of cases where children are being removed from homes due to, quote, neglect, are situations where the primary factor is poverty, not actual neglect or abuse on the part of the parents. Rather than resorting to removing children from their homes and their parents, what changes might we make to Title 4B to address the situation, and how might we go about collecting better data to help them potentially with those potential reforms?
I very much appreciate the question, particularly about data, because I do think we need to be data-driven in our decisions about how to use concrete needs, funding for concrete needs to support families. As I mentioned in my testimony, states are looking at their definitions of child neglect, and yet policy is only so far in addressing the problem. When a caseworker or a mandated reporter or a judge has a family in front of them, they have a difficult determination in, is this family just suffering from material deprivation, or do they need child welfare intervention? So figuring out how Title 4B can be a resource for concrete services is key. I will mention, outside of Title 4B, looking at the 4E Prevention Clearinghouse, there are many folks who will suggest that concrete needs need to be supported when they're delivered as part of a larger evidence-based program, and that's something to consider as well.
Thank you. Ms. Peterson, yours is an inspiring story, and one that speaks to the important role community-based organizations play in our child welfare.
So, hold on. So, so this is kind of how the hearing goes. Every single congressperson who's on that committee has questions and asks people, asks all of, they don't always ask all of them, but they, they ask questions. That's what I'm trying to say. God above. Okay. So they do this Q&A session. They started with this guy who's the chair or whatever. And then after the vote, they all come back, and all the Congress people have like 5 minutes time limit to do a little Q&A of their own that's particularly relevant to them and their decision making. Kate, this is a good question. So you're saying, I was under the impression that these camps were privately owned and the parents paid. So here's the thing. They are privately owned. The problem is, yes, there are absolutely students who, like Paris Hilton, their parents paid and sent them there for behavior reform. But then there's also foster kids who are at the will and in the care of the state, and the state is sending them also to these troubled teen camps when, they're not troubled. They're experiencing trouble. They're, whatever reason they're in foster care has nothing to do with them. They didn't do anything wrong. Like I said, it's a hardship their parent is going through, or a problem that their parent has that they need to fix. It doesn't have to do with the kid and their behavior or anything, but you send them to these camps, and because the camps are like these troubled teen camps that feel like they're trying to make bad kids into good kids, they experience the same behavior reform techniques and tactics, and we'll talk about that more in future episodes of this series, like what those are, but they are terrible, and they are culty, and they are subduing kids rather than teaching them anything that they're actually learning from. It's like Pavlovian. It's not even Pavlovian because there's no reward. It's just fear-based. If you do X, you will be punished. And X is like everything. If you do anything besides these extremely strict things that we want you to do, you'll be punished. That's not teaching a kid how to be like a good person or an independent person or whatever, a functioning person. Exactly, Kate. Instead, it's just squashing them and repressing them. Yes. The camps are trying to break them like horses. Yep. And the thing is, there are some kids who, like I said, they're given these camps as an alternative to going to jail because they're in the juvie system, they have committed crimes. In that case, even though I still don't like it, at least that makes more sense to me that you would send like kids who've committed crimes to bad person camps to go learn how to not be criminals anymore. I still don't like the tactics. I still think they're culty and abusive and gross, but I at least can see the connection there. But foster kids didn't do anything. It's literally not their fault that they're in the foster care system. They didn't do anything wrong. So to have them be sent to these camps is absurd and ridiculous to me. So, and that's why Paris is there, is to say, hey, government, stop funding these camps by sending state, like kids who are in the care of the state to these camps, paying $800 to $1,000 per day to have them there. You're lining the pockets of these for-profit abuse centers, essentially. And kids can be there. I've heard various different stories, anywhere from like 6 weeks, 6 months, 24 months. I heard about somebody like it's a lot. And then sometimes, like I said, we'll talk about it more in later episodes, but that's what Paris is there to say, is like, let's fund other stuff instead. And that's what Mr. Geen was just talking about too, is, Paris was talking about what a lack, like what a waste of taxpayer dollars and what a waste of funding it is to like do this after the fact instead of preventative care. And then Geen was talking about some preventative care measures as well. So that's the kind of the format of how the Q&A goes. The congressperson will ask a question and then they'll try to give a concise answer, and they'll try to fit it all in about a 5-minute segment. There's a lot of great moments throughout this hearing. So again, if you have 4 hours, or honestly, I listened to it on 1.25 speed, 1.5 speed. It's fine to speed it up. So you don't need 4 hours to listen to it. I recommend it. Very educational. Honestly, I don't feel like it was boring. But I also sit here and watch trials all day. So it's a little different kind of taste that I have. But I want to highlight a moment that Paris has later on in the hearing. Let me just scoot over to it. I need to find the rep from California. Is it him, perhaps? Yeah, I want to watch the exchange, I think, with Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding today's hearing, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here. This might be the best example of all of the wonderful people throughout all of our districts that are doing great work that is incredibly beneficial. This panel of witnesses is absolutely fantastic. So thank you all for what you're doing. Title 4B of the Social Security Act provides significant federal funding to target the root causes of the mistreatment of children and provide critical services to help kids and families in need. These funds help states provide a lifeline to kids and to families who've experienced or are in imminent risk of experiencing foster care problems, and to help support community-based services for struggling families. From hiring
I appreciate him just laying out what this Title 4B, what it even is, because like very few, I think at this point we're like about to be an hour into this hearing and nobody has just like defined what it is yet up until him.
hiring and training caseworkers, contracting with non-services for struggling families. From hiring and training caseworkers, contracting with nonprofits to provide prevention services, and improving family court services. This funding makes a real difference in the lives of children. According to my home state, the California's, which is the answer, Mr. Gain, to your question. According to the legislative analysts in California, the average monthly caseload for our state's child welfare system is overwhelming. Everything from in-person investigations, maintenance support, reunification services, and permanent placement. In my district, there are over 1,200 children currently living in foster care and 800 families involved in dependency court cases, and many counties are struggling to find beds and services for transition-aged youth. So I look forward to this reauthorization in a bipartisan way so we can provide the critical resources for our most at-risk constituents.
This is also what happens a lot during this hearing, is a lot of the politicians talking instead of asking questions. They have a 5-minute time limit. And what I don't like is when they make this big speech and then they try to like squeeze in a question or two at the end. And I'm like, we know it's fine.
Constituents. And Ms. Hilton, I want to thank you for your compelling and courageous testimony today and the work that you've been doing, not only to highlight the problems that you face, but the problems that many others face on a day-to-day basis. It's terribly troubling, and we need to do everything we can to change that. What do you think that this committee can do in our reauthorization legislation that would best help not only making these facilities more transparent, but ensuring that if children are at these facilities, they receive the proper care and services that they need?
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate what you just said. And I think it's just important for there to be oversight and regulation. People need to know that they're being watched. What I experienced in these places was inhumane, and it's something that will affect me for the rest of my life. And after speaking to thousands of survivors who have been through the same experiences, I think it's just important to listen to survivors because we have the lived experience. And I just want to say, again, I'm so grateful to be sitting here in front of all of you who could help make a difference in so many children's lives. And I think it's just continuing to do that and to pass this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gain, you mentioned the capacity issue, and this is
So, I appreciate that this hearing has some overlap with what Paris is really advocating for. She outside of this particular hearing about 4B and foster youth, she talks a lot about wanting to implement oversight for camps like this. And I think there's a delineation to be drawn between therapeutic residential treatment facilities. Like Mr. Geen said at the beginning, a small number of children really do benefit from those types of environments. But these for-profit places where people just kind of run amok and do whatever they think works and often is abusive, is not it and should not be receiving the state funding and by sending kids there.
This is an issue. I can't imagine it being satisfactory in anybody else's district. It's certainly not in mine. What do we need to do to increase that capacity? It seems that we just lost a great facility in my district, and that was not enough. We needed 4 or 5 more just in that one community.
So let's be clear. If the testimony of those with lived experience doesn't move you, the research is clear. Children do best in families, clearly. There will always be a need for children to have different forms of care, and we have to invest in them. That means that there will be children going into foster care. It also means that for a very small number of children, they will require a short-term intervention that may be residential-based. It is not a placement. It's not a place for a child to stay for a long time. But we need those very limited facilities to be exceptionally high quality, to be therapeutic, to be involving family in those children. The purpose of that intervention is for the child to go home and succeed in a family. So we need to cover the landscape of the continuum that is needed.
Thank you. I think that you said it best. This is about success for these kids. Mr. Buchanan was spot on when he said this is our future, and we can do a lot to help. So thank you all very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
I really like the way that Mr. Geen talks. He's very easy to understand. He says a lot in a small number of words, which I'm not good at. But I think he makes a great point about involving, like, the prioritizing family. Even if you, like, first of all, best case scenario, you keep the child in some kind of kinship care with a relative, with somebody who's still part of their family. They need family care and family influence. Or if you do feel like you need to send them away for short-term, specific, therapy-based treatment with goals, with reporting, with updates, with accountability and transparency, then you still try to keep the family involved. Because like he said, the goal is for after they get out of there to have success and to have to be able to still be and function and thrive in their family when they get back. I also wanted to point out, or I wanted to watch the next segment really quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding the hearing. First of all, Ms. Hilton, I first read about your story in Vanity Fair. I don't usually read that magazine. My wife does. And she said, you have got to read this story, and you won't believe what happened to her. Your very presence here, believe me, we have a lot of briefings here, but we don't get this type of a crowd, and we certainly don't get that many people who come in from the media and want to get pictures of us. You telling what happened to you in your life and what happened is absolutely incredible and opens up a whole new vision for the rest of us to say, you know, if she has the courage to stand up and talk about this and relate what she went through, certainly we should look at our own lives and our own communities and say, why can't we also look at that and make sure? So I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you were able to do and why you did it. And I knew it was selfless, but I know it has had a great impact. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I have tears in my eyes. And tell your wife thank you so much as well. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be able to do this for the children who have no voice and be the hero that I needed when I was a little girl, terrified in these places. And it's just so heartbreaking to know that there's hundreds of thousands of children that are in these places right now. And for so many years, nobody has been believed or listened to. So I feel that maybe God put me through this and gave me this special gift. So one day I could use it to help others not go through what I did and really turn my pain into a purpose. And thank you all for coming today and everyone, because this is so important for the world to know what's happening and for the children in there to know that we're all here today to help make a difference in their lives.
Well, you're making a difference in a lot of people's lives. So I got to tell you now, my wife's 1 of 9, I'm 1 of 5. We've been blessed with 4 children and 10 grandchildren, and there's nothing in the world more valuable to us than those kids.
Yes.
So thank you for what you're advocating for. Now, just real quickly, Ms. Peterson, I think your story.
Okay, so he moves on to talk to Ms. Peterson. But I think that's what really made me want to jump on this story from the start. From when I first saw this. This hearing happened about a week ago, June 26th. That's a little over a week ago. But this is how a celebrity should be using their platform. How many times have I talked on my channel about celebrities, influencers really mostly, but Paris Hilton is definitely an influencer. She's like first generation influencer, but she's an influencer who just misuse and abuse their power and steal from their audiences and do much worse things to members of their audience. And you know, we've talked about the Cody Cohn and Tana Mongeau situation, about the parasocial relationship there. We've talked about James Charles and the parasocial relationships there. We've talked about all the negative, just like mean, just like gross things that influencers can feel empowered to do toward their audiences. But how refreshing. What a refreshing change of pace to see somebody like Paris Hilton, who does not need to be involved with this. She has money upon money. She's got nothing to gain from doing this. But she's basically, her life now is about advocating for these laws to provide transparency and oversight for these troubled teen camps, and doing stuff like this in Congress, saying like, yes, approve this act for the foster kids, but also let's make sure that this funding that you're talking about is not used to send these foster kids to the types of camps that I went to, because they don't deserve that shit. And she didn't either. So like I said, this hearing is very interesting. It's really inspiring and positive to see Paris Hilton telling her story in this way. It's also what she said there about her experience being a gift. I feel like it struck me last time I heard it, and it struck me this time, of like what a beautiful way to think of it, especially for a person as privileged as she is, who, despite her privilege, went through a very awful circumstance, to see that circumstance now as a gift because she has the platform and the privilege to share and to advocate, I think is really, really lovely, and a sign of humility and a sign of like reality. Like, she gets it. She's not unaware of herself and her influence, and she's being responsible and respectful with what she's doing, and trying to do something positive. And it's not just like when an influencer or a celebrity like signs on with a charity and like makes a commercial for them on TV. Like, she's in the streets. Nobody is covering this hearing. Nobody, no drama channels, no T channels, no, like, I haven't seen like E! News or TMZ or anything really talking about this, because it's boring. It's a congressional hearing, but it's remarkable for that reason, because she is going to like right to the epicenter of who matters the most in making these laws. She's worked individually with 9 different states, and now she's working with the federal government. She's not, she has her team members there, but it's not highly publicized. It's not a big press event. It's not all over the news, but she's just doing it. She's just advocating. She's just doing it on her own. And I think that that's awesome. And that's the type of influencer that I hope all the other influencers grow up to be, essentially. Doing something because intrinsically it's important to you and moral and feels good, as opposed to doing it for money or for more clicks and views and more fame. So let me see. That was the main purpose of today's stream, which is one part of a multi-part stream series I'm going to do on Paris Hilton, Bad Baby, troubled teen industry in general. I think that I liked the idea of starting with, first of all, what sent me down a rabbit hole of research that I did, but also, which was seeing Paris testifying at this hearing, but also starting with the success story. There are several success stories despite all of the hardship that these kids endure at these camps. It gets better. There's the other side. There's healing. There's help available out there. And there's somebody like Paris Hilton who is using her power for good. But at the same time, the impact of that is most informed by knowing what she went through in detail. Because especially, as we mentioned before, the camps are very focused, not so much on like helping self-helping these kids, giving them confidence, giving them, it's much more about trying to subdue these kids. And like Kate put eloquently, the camps try to break these kids like horses. For one of those kids, Paris, not only to not be broken, but to stand up and fight against the people who dared to try to break her, speak out against them, legislate against them, and participate in legislation, in a legislation conversation now at a national level, I think is the perfect justice for these places. And again, she went to 4 of these camps where she had these terrible experiences. So we're going to talk more in future episodes, if you will, about Paris's story with these troubled teen camps, also about Bad Baby and her story with these troubled teen camps, and the whole Dr. Phil element of that as well. I wanted to start with the end result, the positive outcome of, despite what we're going to talk about that Paris went through, she succeeded, she overcame, she achieved, she's thriving now, and kind of knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel before we enter that tunnel, which is what we're going to do in following episodes. So thank you for being here today as we kind of watch I guess it's like a movie where they show like the ending scene and then they like back up and they're like, wait a minute, why am I here? And then and they go back and like start over. Let's start at the beginning, and then they tell the whole story of how they got up to this place. That's a little bit what I'm doing with the order of my stream series. I just thought it was fascinating watching this hearing. And again, it's linked in my description. So is the legal breakdown of Title IV and what it covers, especially Title 4B with the child welfare. And they kept bringing up in several of those clips Title 4E, which goes along with 4B. And they both work together. I think that, you know, if you're interested in this stuff, look at 4E as well and how that impacts youth, especially foster youth. I also am going to one more time show you the website for Breaking Code Silence. And again, what a I guess poignant name for that organization, because of how they try to silence their victims, because of how they try to silence the kids that they treat, silence them and subdue them. They literally, often at these camps, more than one of these camps, more than one kid comes forward and says, the first 3 days I was at the camp, I was not allowed to speak. I think somebody was like the first 6 weeks they were at a camp, they weren't allowed to speak. And like all of these weird things. Silence is their tool. Silencing the kids. Silencing anything that they don't want to hear. So Breaking Code Silence, what a perfect name for an organization like this. Again, with the goal of presenting institutional child abuse and empowering survivors through legislation, research, advocacy, awareness, all that good stuff. I definitely, after watching this hearing, I'm much more aware of all of this stuff now. And especially, like I said, I was not previously aware that the government was sending foster kids to these troubled teen camps. And the more I think about it, the more it haunts me. Because these kids did nothing wrong. They did do nothing wrong. They don't deserve the punishment of this behavioral reform camp. And it's just illogical and mean. I don't get it. So, bothers me. And I'm glad that Paris spoke up about it, because I think she's in the unique position to be able to do so. I think there's not many other people who could. So thanks, Paris Hilton, for doing something good with your platform. I think other influencers and celebrities should take a lesson from you. I'm going to look in the chat really quick. Thank you guys for being here. Those of you who are here live, who stuck it out through some admittedly unusually dry testimony. It's a congressional hearing. I know it's not what we usually cover, but I hope you found it interesting and educational. Oh. Oof. So Kate is sharing, there's a woman in my area who was CEO of a nonprofit for foster kids placement. The nonprofit shut down after they noticed 9 kids passed away in 3 years under her care. That's obscene. The funding stopped. But now she's started up a new nonprofit under a different name and continuing her role as CEO. I imagine doing the same thing of like placement for foster care youth, and the city is pushing back. I'm glad the city is pushing back at least, because they're taking responsibility. Like, we know your history. We're not going to let you do this again. Thank God, because that's the type of thing that at least they can do that at that level. You can't go into people's homes and prevent them from doing things to people, but you can prevent that type of organized, like, we're not going to sanction that shit. We're not going to give you nonprofit status. We're not going to give you funding. And then good. I'm happy to hear it. I'm happy to hear it for sure. Yeah. All right, everybody. I think we're good for today. I hope you have a nice 4th of July weekend. Get to see your family, get to sleep a little bit if you have the day off. I'll be back probably on Tuesday. I'm trying to do a schedule of Tuesday, Friday with my streams. We'll see. I'm still figuring it out. In the meantime, have a great holiday weekend here in the U.S. If you're not in the U.S., have a great just like Thursday. And that's what I got. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments below. While you're there, maybe like this stream or like this video if you're on the replay. Subscribe to my channel if you like what you see. And set your notifications to all, because I'm primarily streaming. But as I said, this is part of a 3-part, maybe 4-part, because I had an idea while we were doing this, stream series that is going to be later turned into a deep dive video. So you're here seeing the raw individual parts, and then for ease of watching in the future, I'm going to put them all together and polish it up a little bit along the way. So thank you for being here. I hope you have a fantastic day or weekend or night or whatever time it is for you. Peace be with you always. Bye.